Ellen, why don't we wait just 1 minute more to give folks a chance to join, then we can go ahead and get started. All right, Ellen, I think we can kick it off if our people are here.
Great, sounds good.
You'll call for, okay, I'll get some introductory words and then you'll call the folks. Welcome everybody. Very much appreciate everyone participating in our third public forum for the Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice. The first two have proved immensely helpful to our work in helping us shape the issues that we're considering and the policy ideas that we've been debating. And I want to thank everyone for their prior participation, and we are very much eager to hear what people have on their minds and in their hearts today. Justice Earls, would you like to say a word of welcome before we get started?
Yes, thank you so much. I am enormously grateful to everyone who is taking the time to be with us this morning. Just a word about process. Because we don't have the full slate of time slots filled, we are going to set the timer initially at 2.5 minutes for each person to give you a little grace period, but we will keep it to 2.5 minutes. Because people signed up for a certain time slot, there may be a point at which we take a short break depending on who's here or not here. We want to make sure that everyone who did sign up and comes online at the right time is able to speak. In terms of the process for the task force, we are directed by the executive order to issue a set of recommendations to the governor on the 1st of December. And then we enter a phase of implementing those recommendations that lasts, and the executive order contemplates we remain in existence through the end of 2022. So this is not by any means the last opportunity to have engagement with the task force. It is the last public hearing before our recommendations, initial set of recommendations go to the governor. But I would encourage you to take advantage of the other forms of input. If you don't have enough time in 2.5 minutes, there's a way to submit written comments through the website portal. And so I urge everyone to get us as much information as they have available. I just want to emphasize that public input is a crucial part of the task force process. And I say that as someone who believes that it is absolutely true that in a democracy, the people are more powerful than the people in power. And it's the people who we should be listening to as we determine what recommendations and what policies we think should be put in place. So you are a crucial part of that process, and I'm eager to hear what you will tell us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Earls. So yes, Ellen, who works with us, will call out each speaker. You'll have up to 2.5 minutes to speak. If you have written documents you want us to see, the website that the Justice referenced is ncdoj.gov/TREC, and Ellen or Greg will put that in the chat room so that you can have that website. So feel free to submit your comments in writing as well, and it will be reviewed and considered. Okay, Ellen, why don't you call our first speaker of the morning?
Great. First up, we have Kelvin Sellers.
All right, Mr. Sellers. Great, we see your name, Mr. Sellers. If you can unmute yourself, look forward to your comments.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Very well, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak today. My name is Kelvin Sellers. I'm a pastor of a church in High Point, North Carolina, Second Chance Ministries. I do a outreach program here through the Yoke Fellow Prison Ministry System of helping inmates who've been released get back into society. One of the things I like to see done as far as racial equality and justice is I like to see for our justice system to have a mandatory or a book guideline for our magistrates to use. Because I'm very uncomfortable that when we arrest someone, that the magistrates has a tendency to take what the police officer says, or it depends on the appearance of an individual. You could take two individuals with no criminal record, and they can get arrested for breaking and entering. And one might get a $5,000 bond, and one might get a bond, a written promise to appear. I think we should have some kind of guidelines in our magistrate system as to, what determines a bond and how much the bond should be. It just shouldn't be on appearance of where a person stay or where a person work. We should have some kind of guidelines that magistrates should be able to follow all across the state of North Carolina. Another thing I like to see is I'm very uncomfortable with some of the ease of our crimes too. Especially in my area, we have a lot of drive-by shootings. I think we should have some kind of mandate. When you drive by and shoot up somebody's car, shoot up somebody's house, it should be some mandatory. I think some of the laws are too light on some of these guys for what they're doing out here. And I don't believe in defunding the police. I think that we need the police. The police need all the budget they can get. But a lot of times I think our problem in our culture is that we are still crime. And we know who done the crime. And we're afraid to say anything. And I wish we had more money we could give citizens to just come out and say, okay, I saw this, and quit being afraid of saying something when you see something. But that's one of the things I just want to see. I appreciate what we're doing here with this Racial Justice Commission. It's so much work we got to do moving forward.
Well, thank you, Pastor Sellers. Thank you very much for your comments. Time is up, but very much appreciated your words.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Next up, we have Katrina Hayes.
I don't see her yet, Ellen, do you?
I don't either. Greg, could you try and promote her, please?
Great. Ms. Hayes, we see you've joined us. If you unmute yourself. Ms. Hayes, if you unmute yourself, there's a mute button in the lower left corner. If you hit that, it will unmute you and we can hear you. Ellen, are you able to unmute the people?
I have asked her to unmute. That's the most I can do for that.
There we go.
Okay.
Hi, here we go.
We got you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your time and leadership. I would like to second Pastor Sellers' recommendation. Now back to my comments. In previous comments, I informed you of the due process violations from a special education case that involved the abuse of my son and deprivation of a free and appropriate education. Today, I would like to highlight one of the many instances of retaliation for continuing to advocate. After not receiving pill rights on that day, I appealed to the state review officer and DPI. The state review officer upheld the decision from the hearing, which was mock. Both the SRO and DPI sent my evidence back to me. I filed a federal complaint. I reside in Cary. A judge in Newborn, 3 hours away, was to preside over the case. Aware of the misconduct already involved in the case, I contacted case manager Krista Baker. Krista would not return my calls. I reached out to Judge Flanagan's Kirk Ian, and he responded that I could file a mandamus. 3 days later, my motion was dismissed without the right to be heard and denied as moot. No appeal rights were provided. The signatures on the judgment belong to Peter A. Moore Jr. and Susan Tripp, not a judge. After the judge conclusions, Judge Louise Flanagan's signature has been copied and pasted. How do I know that? Because it has small Black indentations around it. A few questions. Moot court means pretended court. What was pretended about 17 hours worth of audio of children being abused? In that moment, I had to decide not to allow someone who was trying to project their own pathology onto me and not internalize it. Why does Peter still have a job? Lastly, fraud is where the impartial functions of the court have been directly corrupted. I received this postcard in the mail yesterday. It's time that liberty and justice for all include our children too. Who do we contact to get it? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Hayes.
Next, we have Jamie Lane.
Jamie, we see you on the screen. You can unmute yourself and have the floor. Great.
There we go.
Yeah,
Hey, how's it going, guys?
great.
Hey, I wanted to bring up the topic of the power of police unions in our communities. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles the cities have with policing themselves. It seems to me that when police officers do commit, or not just commit crimes, but impede on liberties of civilians, even when it's proven that they don't really have the power to do much about it because of the police unions. And also I want to bring up the fact that I think there's too many guns in police officers' hands. Not all cops, but we have to admit to ourselves that the police don't really work for us in this day and time. They work for the city, and they're there to create revenue for the city. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with the communities aspect is we don't feel, I don't feel like they are working for us. I think they're working for the city. And they don't, it's not in their, it's not in their, they're not benefiting from, I'm sorry, I'm not as good at speaking as some of you guys. And I thank you guys for doing what you're doing.
Doing great.
To take, for instance, we shouldn't be assailed with a man with a gun for not making a complete stop at a stop sign. And most of the cops that I know are good people, and they've never used their gun in their entire careers, most of them. So why does every cop have a gun? Even at the peace rallies here in Wilmington, North Carolina, I went to the ones that were held by the police because I think that we need to come together. So I attended that one, and I asked the chief of police, why would you bring a weapon to a peace rally? And they said it was part of their uniform. And I think when you bring a gun to a knife fight, things get, not even a knife fight, a fist fight, escalation becomes death. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that all, for instance, meter maids, they don't have guns, but they work for the city in the same aspect. So if most cops don't use their weapon their entire careers, why do they always have one?
Well, Mr. Lane, thank you for your comments.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.
Next, we have Rod Debs.
We see your box, Mr. Debs. Unmute yourself. Great.
Okay, there we go. Thank you for providing this. I would like to speak about police trauma and resilience. We've learned from veterans returning from war zone that a symptom of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is hypervigilance. The body triggered to respond to various events as if they're life-threatening, and this is automatic response, not thinking response. Police officers experience traumatic events all too frequently. The police training itself is traumatic. A wide range of worst case scenarios, deceptively safe situations that are actually deadly. When it comes to trauma resilience, sometimes we turn to police chaplains. I'm a retired minister, but I know that clergy are rarely licensed mental health workers, professionals, qualified to address trauma and resilience. Here in Greenville Police Department, trauma is dealt with by critical incident debriefing and by fellow officers, also not trained and licensed to address repeated trauma and hypervigilance of officers whose bodies react to people and circumstances as life-threatening, sometimes unnecessarily. When officers are sent to professionals for fitness for duty evaluations, they end up with various different mental health providers, do not know them and their pre-trauma baseline. In Greenville, the task force on equity and policing, which includes Chief Mark Holtzman, we discussed the need for licensed mental health professionals for police and for fire rescue. Trauma-informed professionals who could get to know the officers over time, build trust, and assist officers in trauma resilience. A licensed mental health professional in each shift could also help officers unpack the behavior of citizens in crisis, help officers build trust rather than trigger fight-flight behavior, and help promote skills in de-escalation. The expert in this area, Bessel van der Kolk, one of the foremost trauma folks, has a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and he's at Boston College. Thank you for considering steps toward trauma-informed policing. Thank you.
Mr. Debs, very much appreciate your comments. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Next, we have Julia Udall.
Welcome, Ms. Udell. And then we're good to go.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. Before I begin, I want to put this new short video in the chat, which explains and supports the movement to defund the police while taking into account the very real concerns about safety that were so eloquently expressed earlier by Pastor Sellers. I hope it's okay if I put that in the chat, and I would be eager to hear people's responses. But my name is Julia, and today I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of Lyle May. Lyle, as some of you may know, is incarcerated on North Carolina's death row, and I've gotten to know him this past year through programming at Columbia University and Columbia Law School with my team, which works on abolishing the death penalty and other related forms of advocacy. And Lyle has been on North Carolina's death row since 1999 and has been incarcerated in North Carolina since he was 19 in 1997. And as some of you may know, Lyle is quite the expert on the injustices of the criminal legal system in North Carolina. And my team at Columbia is really grateful for his wisdom. And so today I'll be sharing with you 2 of his 4 proposals for the Racial Justice Task Force. And I have a friend who will be sharing the other 2. And so the first proposal is to commission an ombuds office to oversee conditions of confinement in North Carolina prisons and jails, and to investigate complaints of neglect and abuse, and to bring these findings to North Carolina DPS officials for mediated solutions. And Lyle's rationale for this proposal is that North Carolina DPS officials must be informed about how conditions of confinement impact inmate populations to prevent constitutional violations and lawsuits. And that awareness is often undermined by hierarchical reporting in the grievance remedy procedure. He suggests that an ombudsman can more effectively investigate claims without administrative bias or interference. And Lyle's second proposal is to establish a rehabilitative mandate throughout North Carolina prisons that ensures implementation of mental health, vocation, and education programs in every facility. And Lyle's rationale is that prison officials should be held accountable for reducing recidivism rates. Successful reentry begins with early, consistent mental health programs in prisons, followed by vocational training and or access to higher education. Programs to develop the skills necessary to reduce violent conflict, disrupt the hold of gangs on idle, directionless populations, and provide an incentive for continued good behavior. Lyle concludes that a rehabilitative mandate is critical to evolving the culture of confinement, or how inmates perceive the purposes of their incarceration and plans for police. Thank you so much. I hope you guys will consider Lyle's proposals. He is really a fantastic advocate, despite being, or because of being, incarcerated on North Carolina's death row.
Thanks, Ms. Udell.
Next, we have Kiana Tughavi.
Hi, good morning. Thank
Well-
you so much, Julia. I will pick up where she left off, paraphrasing a bit for the interest of time. I'm also a student at Columbia University and a friend of Lyle Mays. His proposal 3 is to create a second look mechanism that grants North Carolina post-release supervision and parole commission the authority to review the life, virtual life, and life without parole sentences of any prisoner who has served a minimum of 25 years and provide relief when appropriate. The rationale for this is that parole, clemency, and compassionate release are critical back-end checks against overcharging by prosecutors or legislators who allow tough on crime politics to drive up carceral rates rather than actual crime rates. When second look mechanisms are abolished or ignored, as they have been in North Carolina, prisons grow overcrowded and aging populations drain the increasingly limited penal resources despite a vastly reduced risk for reoffense. And during emergencies like the coronavirus pandemic, conditions of confinement become unconstitutional and deadly. His fourth proposal is to abolish the death penalty without entrenching life without parole. The rationale for this is that the majority of people in North Carolina support alternatives to the death penalty. Capital punishment is not a deterrent to murder. The death penalty is fundamentally racist in both charging decisions and selection of a death qualified jury. Who receives the death penalty is often arbitrary because the punishment is used to leverage guilty pleas from defendants when prosecutors have a weak case or are overcharging. North Carolina has actually reversed 71% of all death sentences since 1972 because of errors related to prosecutor misconduct, jury misconduct, judicial misconduct, faulty witnesses, and ineffective assistance of counsel. And finally, execution by any method cannot be carried out humanely because there is no humanity in killing an incapacitated human being. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiana.
Next, we have Don Blagrove.
I see your box, Ms. Blagrove. If you unmute. Yeah, unfortunately, Ms. Berger, we're not hearing you. Your mute button is on. It's in that lower left corner. If you can unmute it, would welcome your comments.
While Ms. Blagrove gets situated, we can move to Sierra Motley.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. The rain got me. I don't know if you can see me or not, but can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you. Yep.
Okay. I
Internet.
apologize for the technical difficulties, and
No
I
worries.
appreciate your patience. For those that don't know, my name is Attorney Dawn Blagrove. I am the Executive Director of Emancipate and See, a criminal justice policy advocacy center housed in Durham, but a statewide organization. There are a couple things that I want to talk about. The first thing is the first thing is that I want to say that I have been privy to several of Working Group 2's work sessions, and I have been a guest speaker on that work group. And the first thing I want to say, and I want to elevate, is that I think that we have to make sure that everyone involved on the task force is truly committed to reimagining justice in North Carolina. From what I've seen from that task force, which is heavily dominated by law enforcement, is that working and approaching this from a place of no instead of a place of yes. And because of that, you are finding incredible amounts of resistance to really progressive ideas that could be used to truly reimagine the criminal justice system. So I want to elevate that as well, that it is important that we do this work, but it's also very important that when we're doing the work, we are being honest and contemporaneously efficacy of the work that we're doing. And I suspect that if anyone took a good look at what's going on in Work Group 2, they would see that there is a real problem with efficacy based on the makeup of that group. To that regard, I would like to elevate again the need to readdress with Group 2, the need to remove school resource officers entirely from all public schools. That we need to be addressing. I think that the school resource officers, based on the empirical data, do more harm to Black and Brown children by being there than any good that they are creating by being present. I think if we're not going to remove them, then at the very least, we should unarm them and take them out of uniform. The school should not be a place where children are further traumatized by over-policing. And by having armed law enforcement inside of our schools, even as early as elementary schools, we are doing a disservice to our Black and Brown children. I would also like to elevate that as it relates to law enforcement and law enforcement holding themselves accountable, that they have shown us over and over again that they are incapable of doing that. As a result, I think I would second the omnibus request that was made by Mr. Lyle, who is incarcerated on death row. And I would say that we need an omnibus office that is independent, very much like Prisoners Legal Services in North Carolina, that is designed to police the police all over the state and all of our criminal justice system for that matter.
Blagrove, I'm sorry, but the time has expired, and I very much appreciate your comments. If there are other points you want us to consider, you can either reach out directly or use that portal at ncdoj.gov/TREC.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Next, we have Sierra Motley.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you for letting me speak. I just want to kind of reiterate what Dawn was saying about the working group. I've been watching a lot of the working group meetings, and Working Group 2 seems to have a lot of pushback especially with the SOR officers. And I think that they do need to bring that back, because I'm not really sure why SOR officers need to be in elementary schools. I can understand high schools and middle schools, but it's really uncomfortable to have them in the elementary school. When I was in elementary school, they wasn't there. So I'm not really comfortable with them being in the schools. And the community has been also watching the working groups, and particularly working group 2. They all feel that it's a lot of pushback with it being heavily a majority of state officials and officers, and them not really reimagining and thinking outside the box to help get rid of the equities that we have. That's why you guys are here, to get rid of the equities that are inside of the court system and the justice system. So I just think that there needs to be something done with working group 2, and just have because the community doesn't feel like the task force group is going to do anything that I've heard. They just don't have any faith in it. I don't know if it's because of the things that has been done in North Carolina. But if you could just take that into consideration, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Motley.
Next, we have Vernetta Alston.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Representative Vernetta Alston. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. At every moment in our state's history, the death penalty has been used to inflict racial violence against Black people. This singular purpose has had its intended effect. Black people have been terrorized, our families and communities torn apart, and for those Black folks forced into our death penalty system, they have suffered the overcriminalization and disproportionate punishment that the system relies on to operate. In the Racist Roots Project, a new compilation of data, historical information, and individual stories, advocates and scholars carefully describe the centuries of harm that our death penalty system is solely responsible for causing. The project's creators highlight that people of color make up less than 30% of our state's population, and yet 60% of our death row. Death defendants are twice as likely to be sentenced to death if they are accused of killing a white person rather than a person of color. Black defendants are far more likely to be wrongfully convicted, and 8 out of 10 of North Carolina's death row exonerees are Black and a 9th Latino. These kinds of statistics beg for the reform that you are charged to consider. The system does not help us reach our public safety goals. It has never been implemented fairly, and it forces us to wrestle with the unthinkable possibility that North Carolina has likely executed an innocent person. I represented one of our few exonerees who, by luck, was able to prove his innocence after spending 30 years on our death row. Henry McCollum and his brother were not just charged, but convicted and sentenced to death and imprisoned for 3 decades for a murder they did not commit. They were children, intellectually disabled. In their case, law enforcement failed to turn over exculpatory evidence, and the true killer was left on the street to assault and kill again. My client, labeled the worst of the worst by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, carried that label needlessly for 2 decades. He was preyed on by a death penalty system that sought to end his life and that has destroyed the lives of countless Black people in North Carolina. The death penalty is racist, it is arbitrary, and it is irreparable. It is one of the greatest horrors that we have inflicted on Black people, and that fact begs for us and for you to do something about it. If we want to reform our criminal justice system, we must repeal the death penalty, and that process can start here. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you, Representative Alston.
Next, we have Charlene Ross.
We see you, Ms. Ross.
Hello, everyone can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm here to discuss having the pit maneuver, which terminated my son's life, prohibited in the state of North Carolina. I don't know if you can see this picture that I have of him in his car. Uh, can anyone see that?
We can.
Okay. So just briefly, on June the 29th, my son Shanquell Barrett was killed after North Carolina State Patrolman performed a pit maneuver on his car. Shanquell was pronounced dead at the scene. My family, his sister, his father, and me, his mother, is still devastated and grieving over the tragic loss. He didn't pose an immediate threat of violent felonies such as robbery, murder. Therefore, it did not have probable cause. The location wasn't safe. The officer was putting the public in danger, including my son. The pit maneuver is a deadly force which terminated many lives, including my son. On the recording, the officer stated that he has to get up to over 90 miles per hour to pit my son. And also, according to the research, it was not supposed to be used on a low impact car, and keeping in mind the speed of 90 miles per hour. The officer used a pit maneuver in a residential area around houses and trees, which also, according to the training policy, that this is prohibited due to endangerment of the innocent. In my opinion, alternative measures could have been used because it didn't pose an immediate threat, such as discontinued the chase. The state trooper could have taken down the license plate, as I heard on the recording, my name and address being called out. Therefore, he could have simply come to my house to speak with Shanquell and preserve his life, or even use spikes or a roadblock. Being that they had knowledge that the car was registered to me, they could have phoned me to see if I reported my car stolen. I would like to reference an incident what happened in 2018, just a few weeks after my son Shanquell was killed. Brandon Navarro had committed armed robbery and carjacking, which led to a 45-minute chase through 3 counties. And in this case, they're using an alternative measure that he was able to walk away with his life. Now I'd like to address other fatalities that have been reported in the state of North Carolina due to the use of the pit maneuver. I can recall a story. It was a lady that I used to work with whose son, along with 2 others, was in a chase and a pit maneuver was used on them. And 2 of the individuals was killed immediately. Therefore, it has now become her experience has become my experience, and I regret not speaking out against it then in the year 2015 when it occurred. Please note as well, North Carolina ranks 11th in the nation in pursuits related to deaths, with 24 casualties between 1996 and 2015, according to the data with the pit maneuver. And I'm almost finished. This is it. Just to name a few places, the pit maneuver is prohibited in Utah, New Orleans, Texas, also certain cities in North Carolina, such as Fayetteville, because it takes life and is dangerous for all parties involved, including the public as well. Therefore, I have a strong conviction and as well as convinced that the use of the pit maneuver must be banned. I couldn't save my son. However, there is purpose in my pain, which led me here today, so that others will not encounter the same fate as Shanquell, because at the end of the day, it was not warranted and there was no probable cause. I would like to see it banned because it took my son's life, and I would like to see a bill go into effect immediately in honor of my son, Shanquell DeVere Barrett, and to be called Shanquell's Law, which prohibits and bans the use of the pit maneuver in the state of North Carolina. My cause for today is to see that other lives are preserved, so whomever may get their day in court. Therefore, I'm requesting that it goes before the Senate and is approved. Thanks for allowing me to speak on behalf of my son and to have a voice. As I was speaking with Department of Public Safety, I had a meeting with the legislation in Raleigh.
But
Time is up. Okay.
But I want to thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Very well delivered.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jake Sussman.
Welcome, Jake.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Hi. Good morning. My name is Jake Sussman. I live in Charlotte. I've spent 15 years handling civil rights and criminal justice matters around the state. And for the last 3.5 years, I've helped lead a nonprofit, nonpartisan project called the Justice Collaborative. We're a national organization that supplies legal, policy, and communication support to leaders and organizations working to end dehumanization and extreme vulnerability, starting with mass incarceration. I'd like to make 2 quick points based on my work across the country and including here in North Carolina. First, often when we engage in these incredibly important conversations about racial equity and criminal justice, we find there's a dangerous framing that takes place whereby people insist this is a zero-sum game, as if remedying systemic injustices, including racial unfairness, requires a corresponding decrease in public safety. I just want to emphasize that this is a really misleading and unhelpful framing that enables opponents of change to rely on false binaries that pits efficiency against fairness, safety against justice. Far too often, our efforts to diminish reliance on law enforcement, on jails and prisons, triggers accusations that these reforms somehow threaten public safety. We have seen that clearly here in North Carolina, but this is not a battle between justice and safety. These are not trade-offs that we have to make. It's rather a battle between competing visions of public safety. And I know that this task force takes that seriously, but I want to emphasize that. My other quick point on a specific matter of policy that I know is being considered by the task force, the death penalty sits atop a criminal legal system that for far too long has valued retribution and fear more than it does public safety and restoration. As the most visible symbol of white supremacy, I'm hopeful that this task force will be recommending its abolition. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you, Jake. Nice to see you.
Next, we have Kathy Greggs.
Welcome, Ms. Greggs.
Hello, good morning. How's everybody doing? My name is Kathy Greggs. I am the co-founder and president of Fayetteville Police Accountability Community Task Force here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My reason for my actual public comment today is 3 things. My first thing is I just want to make sure that we relate to each other as not only as being activists and trying to advocate for our community as well as North Carolina, but also I am a military combat veteran as well as the founder of Fayetteville Police Accountability. We believe in accountability, and I say this because I want to make sure we emphasize that working group 2 that is continuously going back and forth on SROs not being in schools or having SROs unarmed. I find that very, very upsetting to me because I feel that everyone on this task force should have been committed, should have been having integrity and accountability with transparency of the people. So I feel that because me being a military veteran, that we must understand that as leaders, our attributes are very, very well looked into. We have a reputation. We have to make sure that the people that we are serving get what they need, because we don't work for you, you work for us. Okay, so I just want to make sure we understand that. Secondly, we want to also emphasize statewide having an independent civilian police oversight authority with the citizen review board across the state. We need this. We need this for transparency, and we also cannot allow the police to continue to police themselves. We also want to emphasize as a statewide effort with several different nonprofit organizations of eliminating qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is putting us in risk of being impoverished of all municipalities across North Carolina. We must not allow the police to police themselves, and they must be held accountable for their crimes and their actions. We believe that holding them responsible for liability insurance and having them have their own attorneys will make them be held responsible and have more integrity, along with transparency with the people in the community. We also want to emphasize that as mental health response across the state, as well as for police accountability during mental health response, we have an issue with that. We are having police kill people on site during a mental crisis, when it clearly states in each policy that you're supposed to have a SIT team, which is a crisis intervention team trained person on site when you are serving anyone on mental or whenever you are coming to do a well check. But we are getting people killed. We had over 3 in Cumberland County in the last 2 years. I find this very, very, very very degrading. And I think as this governor task force, you need to hold yourself accountable. You need to have transparency, and you need to have the integrity to do this job the correct way. If not, we need to make sure that we do not elect you in the seat if you are elected official. And we did make sure that we hold you accountable, because you work for us. We do not work for you. The people do not work for you. You work for us. And we're tired of paying taxes when you're not helping the people out here. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs.
Next, we have Pastor Ron Gates.
Welcome, Pastor Gates. We're not hearing you currently. If you unmute yourself, look forward to your comments. There we go.
Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate you for the opportunity to be able to speak at this particular time, and thank God for the Attorney General, Josh Stein, and to respect for honors that are on this platform. Also to all legal advisors and colleagues, and to the task force. The NC Third Task Force, really appreciate you for this opportunity to share. I really appreciate Judge Alan Thornburg, in which I'm a pastor here in Asheville, North Carolina. And so I really appreciate him. I'm a part of a organization, which is the IMA, which is a collaboration of a lot of different churches. We also have a facilitate with the Baptist Minister Union, which is the BMU, and then also the Mud Creek Baptist Association. So it's a collective of about 83 different churches covering about 5 different areas. And one of the things that we wanted to address is the oversight board, how valuable and how important it is. I know when the House Bill 916 was submitted, it didn't have no relevance and didn't have no stick-to-itness at that particular time, because wasn't nothing really taking place, but due to the uprise of things that have been happening, the death of numerous individuals, and then definitely with George Floyd, we see that the oversight board is very valuable and important to the community. So it will bring relevance. It will bring transparency. It will bring accountability, and definitely a scale of balance of justice. I believe that the oversight board should be a balance of individual, as I say, for the people. That the people should be a part of that oversight board to be able to help adjudicate the appropriate measures in regards to disciplinary actions, to recruiting attention. So just want to say thank you for my opportunity to be able to share, and definitely will be in touch. Appreciate it.
Mr. Gates, thank you for your remarks.
Thank you.
That was our final speaker that is currently online.
All right. Well, why don't we break till 11 a.m., Ellen, and then if you can reach out to the remaining speakers to see if they can advance their schedules to be available soon thereafter. And then Anita, does that sound like a good course of action? You take over at 11 and we'll try to finish it up.
Yes, Ellen, can you tell us how many people signed up who have not been on yet?
Currently, we have 4 people that did sign up that have not yet spoken because they haven't.
All right, so yeah, that sounds like a great plan, to take a 10-minute break and see if we can reach those 4 people.
Okay, why don't everybody just put themselves on hold and come back at 11 a.m. and we look forward to continuing this.
Okay, I'm going to call us back to order and give people a minute or two to get situated. Thank you all for sticking with us. My understanding is that of the 4 people who signed up that we haven't heard from yet, one person was signed up for 10:40, and we have not been able to reach that person. Another person was signed up for 11 o'clock, and then 2 of the people we haven't heard from were signed up for 11:40. One of those 2 people had a family childcare emergency and has given us a written statement, so we'll be able to hear that written statement. And then for the other person who signed up for 11:40 and understandably is not here yet, our proposal would be that Ellen and Jasmine, our staff leads, stay on and record that person if they arrive, so that we'll all be able to hear their testimony. We just won't hear it in real time. So that's, unless any task force members have concerns, that's our proposal for how we move forward. Is everyone okay with that? Wonderful. So Ellen, does that mean we have either one person or at least a statement to hear now?
Yes, we have a statement here that I can read out to the group. It's a list of 10 recommendations for consideration, and I will read them now. They are from William James. Hire and promote minority officers. Provide equal mentorship and training opportunities to minority law enforcement. Allow citizens to take Justice Academy courses or audit them so citizens understand how officers are trained. Stop using voice stress analysis automated by artificial intelligence for hiring minority officers. Be more open to the public about the ArcGIS data gathering project in the Raleigh Police Department. Be more open to the public about automated license plate readers and storing movement data. Be more open about receiving federal information for local law enforcement. Be more open to disclosing probable cause constructed in parallel to data obtained. Determine if all officers need a gun all the time. Change the uniform requirement if necessary. And lastly, any pre-arrest deferment for law enforcement should be reviewed judicially or quasi-judicially. I will send all 10 of those recommendations around to the full task force as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm also looking through the list to see if there's, but Ellen, is there anyone who is here now to speak at the public hearing who has not had a chance to speak?
No, our 4 remaining attendees have all given their 2-minute testimony.
Okay. In that case, I think that given the situation we're in, that it makes sense for us to adjourn the task force public hearing, except for the staff who will remain online and be available to record the testimony of the 11:40 person or anyone else who logs on late to gather that testimony. But as there's no one else here to address us at this point, I will just thank all of the task force members for being with us this morning and for hearing this input. Attorney General Stein, do you have anything you want to add?
Just words of appreciation to the people who addressed us. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your views. And to all the task force members, this is just another evidence of your commitment to working on this issue and trying to make meaningful change in North Carolina. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.